Hey guys, welcome back to my channel. So here we are, another houseplant video for all of you guys. That's because I'm bored as hell and I got nothing else better to do than to tend to my plants, care for them, love them, and obviously share my experience with all of you guys. And hopefully you're watching this at the comfort of your own home, practicing social distancing and doing your part to help flatten the curve. But yeah, so in today's video, we are going to be repotting the jade, which I've had for about a couple years. And this guy is in badly need of a repotting, and I'll show you why later, as well as we're going to do the Syngoniums here, these pink splash and the Wendlandii, only because these are fast growers and they definitely need to move up soon, especially as we head into the growing season. In addition, we'll obviously be doing a bit of Q&A. I posted a question on my community page and asked you guys if you have any plant or life related questions for me. So we'll get started with the Syngoniums. As mentioned, these guys are fast growers, so they're currently in a 3-inch container, and I'm gonna move them up to the 6-inch container. That way they can thrive maybe for another year and a half, so that way I don't have to repot this next season. The soil I'm going to be using for the Syngoniums is a mixture of regular potting mix, about 70% of it, and 30% cacti soil with a handful of perlite for extra drainage. So we'll get started with maybe the pink splash, and while we do that, let's go answer one of the questions. So question here is, what are some plants you recommend for north-facing windows? So I don't have a north-facing window, I only have a south-facing window. Typically north-facing windows, obviously the least or lowest light from all directions. They aren't as strong as that of like a south-facing window, and or even an east and a west. My windows at the office is a north-facing window, and I've had plants do well in there. Surprisingly, some Hoyas actually do pretty okay in a north-facing window. I had like my Hoya carnosa and the Hoya macrophylla, and that's north-facing window. Wow, this guy's a little bit stuck. Okay. We just normally you want to like squeeze these guys to help them you know, come out a little bit easier, but this is stuck. Okay, so but plants I recommend for north facing window, you can see why it's stuck. See, I don't know if you guys can see this, but that is circling around right there. Good thing we are going to repot this, because I don't think he would have survived in that 3-inch container for the rest of the season. Snake plants, ZZ plants, ponytail palm, those type of plants that typically will thrive in any lighting condition will do well in a north-facing window, as well as pothos or epiprenum, because those guys can do well in any lighting condition as well. They may just grow a little bit slower and not as big as that if you have them in a south-facing window. Ferns, you know, ferns like to be a little bit more in the low and not that intense type of lighting. So those are the plants I would recommend for a north-facing window. Okay, so I'm gonna pot this guy here. I'm going to definitely, yeah, I think I'm not going to sit it too low. I do want it to obviously, you know, have a nice height, so that way it's not like the pot closing it too much. But next question is plant recommendations for a south-facing window. So I have a south-facing window, and you guys know you can do a lot with a south-facing window. But this specific question is plant recommendation for south-facing window that doesn't get much light. So I'm assuming you have a south-facing window, but you probably have like buildings blocking it, and the lighting isn't as direct. So and it probably doesn't go as far back into your home. That's kind of my assumption. In that case, you know, I would then maybe lean towards more of plants that do well in maybe like a medium to bright light of plants. Syngoniums are one of them. They do well in medium. Again, pothos as well. And then you have your snake and ZZ and you know, ponytail palm. Those guys will do well in any of those lighting condition. But if you want like a tropical plant in a south-facing window, I would probably say, you know, maybe like a Pelia peperomioides, even though mine is really close to a south-facing window, gets a ton of bright indirect light, as well as a couple hours of direct sunlight. You know, for the most part, I think they'll do fine as well in like a medium to bright light. So that's probably my recommendation. Okay, this guy's leaning a bit, and that's because he sits like further back there, and I normally have to rotate it because I only have sun on one side of my place, so they typically like to follow the sun. But after repotting this, that was easy. You want to just water this guy and then place him back to where he was. But this guy should do well now. So we'll do this one. I really like the pink splash. You know, I didn't think I would like this Syngonium. It's actually my first Syngonium, and this is my second one. So next question: how do I know when to repot a Monstera Deliciosa? I can't tell, and I'm afraid to repot it and kill it. It really does depend on the size of your Monstera. I mean, if you have one of those like mature and larger ones, they typically don't need to be repotted for like another 2 years. But if you have like a smaller one, maybe like in this size, you want to repot them every year. So it really does depend. But the way to tell when you know, a plant or a Monstera or any plant that needs to be repotted is obviously if you're noticing that the growth of the new leaves are smaller than the previous one, and it's like during growing season, and you're also noticing that you're often watering it a lot more frequent than you used to. And another way is obviously when you kind of remove the soil, you know, the top layer of the soil or the top 2 inches, you're noticing the roots starting to show up. That means it's probably root bound and it's time for it to be repotted, because you know, when a plant is root bound, typically, you know, there'll be more roots than the soil, especially when you lift it up, and yeah, and the plant won't just grow as big. I noticed that with my ficus ruby. I noticed it was like really growing really slow, and it just wasn't producing any new leaves, or the leaves that it was producing was a lot smaller than the previous ones. And typically the newest leaf will eventually be bigger than the previous one, right? So, but this is kind of what you can see. You know, this is kind of a start of like getting root bound, is the roots are also starting to circle. So that's a way to tell as well when your plants need to be repotted. You obviously want to repot during the growing season, only because they can recover from the shock a lot quicker and faster than if you were to repot during the winter. That's why you usually don't repot in the winter unless it's emergency. When it comes to repotting, as we're doing this guy, you want to just gently remove the soil and, you know, try not damage the roots as well. The next question here is, what are some of your favorite plant shops online, and what is your favorite plant at the moment? So this was actually a common question, like where to shop online, and it makes sense. You know, obviously we can't go to our local nursery and just do some plant shopping. And unfortunately in Canada, there's not much shopping online that you can do. Some local nurseries are doing like curbside pickup, so you can kind of call them, and you know, if you're looking for a specific plant, and then drive up there and pick it up. But so I actually have never shopped online except for a local nursery here called Crystal Star Nursery. Sometimes they'll do like delivery, and I think this year they're really going to expand their delivery across Canada. They used to only do like local deliveries, but I've ordered a whole bunch of plants there. Actually, I recently ordered one a couple weeks ago, and I can't wait for that package to come, man. I'm so excited. There's going to be some really good plants in that one. Like, I think I got maybe like 12 plants, because I was like, I don't know when I'm ever gonna see a nursery again, so I figured why not. But that's really where I've only shopped online. There are some Etsy sellers I know, and I've looked at them, but a lot of these Etsy sellers I find are the ones selling these like rare plants, and they really mark them up pretty crazy. So I don't even want to get into a conversation about them, because I have my opinion about, you know, resellers of plants. Okay, I'm gonna talk about this while we're at it. Is so I used to be a sneakerhead, right? And I love sneakers, and I used to always chase, like, you know, the most coveted sneakers and spend a crazy amount of money on them. And there's some resellers of sneakers where they will buy them during the release, and then they would like mark them up and put them on like eBay and whatnot. I'm noticing with plants, there's some people who's doing that, where if like a nursery is releasing, for example, the pink princess philodendron, someone I remember, I think, bought like a whole tray, and then I'm not gonna say who their Instagram name is, and then next thing you know, I see them posting it on Instagram for selling it for like 2x the price they bought it for, and everyone was so upset because they couldn't get their, you know, the pink princess, and you know, at that point the nursery ended up putting like a policy where you can only buy like 2 or 1 per limit, because it's ridiculous. I mean, like, come on, it's plants, you know, like, I get it's not freaking shoes. Maybe that's just my view on it. So anyway, I digress from the question there. So next question, can you tell us about using fertilizer on your plants? You know, in recent videos you mentioned you don't use fertilizer, so how do you get them to grow so well, and so on and so forth? I don't use fertilizer on most of my plants. The only time I've ever used a commercialized fertilizer was on my Monstera Deliciosa, like a 10-15-10 solution, and I would always water it down. And but for the most part, I don't use fertilizer on most of my plants, although I am now reconsidering that, especially on the Pelia, especially those plants that are a lot bigger, who I've had for like a while now. I'm noticing, for example, the Pelia isn't as lush. It's lush, it's not as green as the leaves should be, and so I did just recently fertilize this with some liquid plant food, an even base solution, like a 10-10-10. And what those 3 numbers actually represent, when you go to the nursery and you find those plant food that has those numbers, they represent the percentage of, the first number is nitrogen, the second number is phosphorus, and the third number is like potassium. So nitrogen is more for like leafy and like lush type of plants, while phosphorus is more for the roots, and then the potassium is more for like the sturdiness and the strength of that plant and getting it to grow bigger. So yeah, so that's what those numbers mean, and you should only fertilize during the growing season. Follow the recommended solution. But I would always dilute it, because I just don't want it to be too strong, because sometimes you can get them out of hand, and too much fertilizer is not necessarily good for the plant as well. So, but yeah, so I don't fertilize most of my plants, but I think this year I'm going to have to start doing some, because that Pelia, if you guys check out my recent video on houseplant secrets, I featured it. It's nice and big and lush, but the leaves aren't as green as they should be. So I definitely need to give some fertilizer there. Next question. Why did you quit YouTube for a while, and what made you, decide to come back? Let's spill some tea, shall we? A few people have asked this, and the reason why I maybe decide to answer this question is because I keep getting asked the question. For those of you guys who's followed me for a while, about sometime last year, during probably the summer to fall, I kind of stopped posting videos for a while, partly because I was, enjoying the summer. I began to really put myself out there socially, and I was, making new friends, and I was hanging out a lot, and yeah, and then I kind of met someone who piqued my interest. And it's very rare that I meet someone out of nowhere and I kind of like you. But yeah, so you kind of got distracted. On top of that, I still have a full-time job, and making these YouTube videos and Instagram and all that stuff, it's time-consuming, right? And trying to stay on top of obviously all the comments, all the feedback, all the messages. It's not as easy. You don't just shoot a film and edit it and then publish it the next day. There's a lot of stuff that goes in between. Yeah, so I was enjoying a bit of life, and it was a really great experience. I had a really great experience. It was anyway. But long story short, that is no longer the case, and it was a great experience. And if more than anything, I kind of lost myself during that time. But at the same time, I've learned a lot about myself. So I was I'm back because first of all, you guys know I love my plants, and second of all, I do enjoy the creativity aspect of it, the marketing behind it because of the algorithms. Those always intrigue me about how do you grow on Instagram or how do you grow on YouTube, which by the way, I was actually thinking of maybe doing a few videos on how to get how to do that stuff, and using like the plant as an example. If you guys are interested, comment and let me know, and I'll share with you guys some of my tactics or on how to kind of grow on any of these social platforms. Anyway, now we're gonna do the jade, and this guy I've had for over 2 years, and I had this one maybe about this size when I first got it, and I've obviously have grown to this size where it's now a trunk, and has produced a few obviously babies. I've also actually pruned this last year, and you guys can see that when you prune a plant, it ends up pushing new growth on the side. So I did want to make this more into like a tree shape because I've seen these guys huge, humongous, and they're really expensive. So I definitely want my jade to be that, but this needs to be repotted, and I'll show you guys like how, so you can see that root right there. So let's get rid of the soil here, and then I got a lot of questions about the jade because obviously it was a picture I posted, so we'll start answering some of them. First one is, can you talk about root healthy system, where to prune them when repotting? I just repotted my jade plant, it's still struggling in a small area. Healthy root system. I've never really come across like a bad root system whenever I repotted, except for maybe my Thai Constellation Monstera, only because I had them in water for a while. But normally, the roots, healthy roots are if they are strong and they're not brittle and they're not falling apart and they're like white, depending on the plant, obviously. Bad root system or dead roots are those that are black and pretty much can just easily fall off. So those are the ones you want to trim. It is okay to trim healthy roots as well if you want to control the size of your plant, and there's nothing wrong with that. We trim the top part of our plant, so you can also trim the roots. Yeah, I mean, let's see how this root system is with this jade. So obviously their roots are a little bit more kind of a threaded style type of roots. They're very thin and fine. They're not like the roots of, say, like a pothos, which is a little bit more thicker and white, or jade satin Scindapsus. But let's go ahead and loosen some of this soil and see what we got going on here. So we got a couple of babies here right now. I'm just gonna remove this guy. Maybe we'll pot them in like a different soil. And these actually just came from obviously one of these leaves. I just like placed it on the soil and it created its own root system and eventually had its own little plant there. So, but next question, does jade need a lot of sunlight? They prefer to have a lot of sunlight, although you guys can have these guys in like low to medium bright light as well. They can thrive in those lighting conditions, but again, they prefer more of the brighter light. But if you are gonna have these in low lighting, you wanna make sure you're definitely holding back on your watering. You don't want to water them too often because these guys do not like to be overwatered because their leaves typically will hold a lot of the water. So you'll know when you need to water this plant is they'll tell you the leaves will start becoming wilted and soft and whatnot. Yellow leaves are falling off. That's usually a sign of like overwatering when it comes to jade. So if that's happening to your jade, just keep an eye on your watering. You never want to water these guys when the soil is wet. I actually honestly allow the soil to go completely dry before I water this guy. And then I would also like touch the leaves to see if it's soft or if it's firm. And if it's soft, then that means obviously it needs to be watered as well. Hi, I noticed that my jade plant is developing some mishap in its leaves. The very top of the baby leaves is obviously falling off. Again, I think that's, I don't know how your plant looks, where you have it, how often you're watering it, but if you are experiencing leaves are falling off, especially the baby ones, my guess is you don't have them in enough of a bright light, plus you're probably watering them too much for the lighting it gets. So just keep an eye on it. But yeah, so you can tell here, so the roots here are very fine, kind of like a thread style, and so I'm probably just not gonna remove the rest of the soil here. I think this will be fine. It's a bit loose now, but this is a big root ball, man. This guy has been needing a bit of a bigger room because I also saw the roots like starting to stick through the container it was in. But yeah, so we're going to move this one up in a 8-inch container. It was in a 6-inch container. So, I don't want to move this up too big because these guys aren't like Syngoniums. They don't grow as fast. This one took obviously 2 years to get to this, coming off this small size right there. So I'm not going to plant it too deep because I do want this guy to be, up a bit, just below maybe the container here. And yeah, so this is good. So the soil mix I'm going to use with this one, so about like 80% cacti soil and about 20% regular potting mix, and then a whole bunch of perlite for extra drainage, because obviously you guys want this to, to drain well when it comes to watering. You never want this plant sitting in wet soil. So yes, we're going to top this soil up and we're going to answer a few more questions. Growth tips for Scindapsus Exotica. So I had a Scindapsus, and unfortunately I was, during the time when I was having fun, I kind of neglected it, and I did, it needed to be repotted, and it just eventually just died. So that's what happens if you don't repot your plant that needs to be repotted. But growth rate for Scindapsus, similar to like a pothos, is dependent on obviously the lighting you give. The more bright light you get, the more faster it will grow and the bigger the leaves will get. A leaf just fell, so normally when this happens, just place it on top of the soil and it'll produce a little shoot like this eventually, and then you can have a brand new jade. But yeah, so you want to make sure that obviously the lighting it gets is bright light, and you don't also want to overwater it. Normally Scindapsus will tell you, as well as pothos will tell you when they need to be watered, because their leaves will start to kind of go a bit droopy and a bit wilted. And I usually prefer to water my pothos that way rather than overwatering them, because they'll bounce back. Because if you overwater them, you're gonna have leaves falling off from the base, and then you're gonna have one of those like trails where it's like bare at the top or at the base, and then you got all these leaves at the bottom. So that's just kind of like my tip when it comes to taking care of Scindapsus or pothos. So this guy should be good. It's just gonna fall apart, but it's just gonna fall over here. So what you want to do is right after, I'm just gonna pack a bit of the soil in, and then we're just gonna water this this guy, so that way the soil and the roots can like merge together, and so that way it'll hold in place. But man, I'm excited for this plant because, like I said, I've always wanted like a big jade that, like, you know, just sits maybe in the centerpiece of my table. And so I'm gonna place this guy again near a south-facing window to where he was, which is pretty close to the window. Gets a ton of bright light, and so he'll be fine right there. But next question. How do you get rid of Fungusgnats? So Fungusgnats are obviously those little black, almost fruit fly looking type of bugs that tend to fly around in your place, especially near the plant where it may be infested. And they typically come from when you got like wet soil, and you know, from overwatering. So that's where they lay their eggs, and eventually will hatch, and then, you know, start coming out of the soil and start you know, flying around in your home. So there are ways to kind of just get rid of the ones that are flying by using like home remedy stuff. Like I used to actually use like old sweet wine, leftover wine, that I would just place little glasses around the pot, and they're attracted to sweet, so they will go in there and drown. Or you can make like, you know, apple cider vinegar, a bit of dish soap, and some water, and they'll go in there and drown as well. Or you can use like yellow sticky traps that I have here. I got this like from Safers as a brand, so you guys can check the link below on Amazon. But these are really good for catching a lot of the flies that are flying around. But what you'll notice is when you do that, it's not sometimes enough to get rid of them forever, because there's probably still eggs in the soil, so they'll eventually continue to come out, and so on and so forth. If you do happen to notice that, you can like prevent, you know, coming under the soil by putting like sand. I don't recommend that. I actually recommend to getting rid of them for good by watering your plant with a bit of hydrogen peroxide. So if you have a watering can, you know, maybe put a bit of hydrogen peroxide and then just water your plants thoroughly. Make sure that water drains through. That will kill all the pests in there and all the bugs that's in there. It's not just maybe, you know, the fungus gnat eggs, but other stuff that's going on in your plant. It's also a good way to kind of just troubleshoot any plant issues that you have. So for example, if you feel like you have root rot, that will help kind of just rid of all those roots that are dead already. And but yeah, so sometimes it's good to use hydrogen peroxide. I've used it on my Pelia because I had fungus gnat infestation, and it was just, you know, non-stop you know, coming out. So I figured, you know what, let's just get rid of it, and ever since then it stopped. So this Peperomia picobanda, normally I would repot this, but I just remembered I recently watered this guy. And you never want to repot a plant that has wet soil, only because it's very hard to remove the soil from the roots without damaging the roots. So I'm not going to do this guy right now. I'm just going to let it sit here for a bit and let it dry out, and then we'll repot this guy for now. But for now, we got the Syngoniums and the jade plant, which obviously needed to be repotted. And what other questions do we got here? Is it best to use nursery pots, like plastic containers, or plant them directly into your ceramic pot? So everyone always asks me this. Usually the beginners ask me this, and there's nothing wrong with using ceramic pots or terracotta pots, as long as there's drainage holes in it. Most decorative pots do not have any drainage holes, so I always use these plastic containers to pot my plants in. Reason being is because, again, these guys have all these like drainage holes, so it's also easier for me to watch the water drain through when you're watering them. So I'll just typically remove them from the decorative pot, water the plant, and then watch it drain through. I think it's one of the most important like plant care that you have to be mindful of, is watching that water drain through, because if you're not seeing that, if you're not able to see that, then you risk obviously overwatering your plants, and then, you know, that is a very good chance that you're going to kill that plant. So I always plant mine in using plastic containers. Obviously, I reuse a lot of these guys because you never want to just, you know, use them once. So I do a lot of repotting, so I often reuse a lot of my plastic containers. But like I said, if you can find terracotta pots, those usually are great as well. Not only because they have drainage holes, but terracotta pots has, like, you know, tiny holes in the clay. It allows a little bit more air to come through, and obviously will you know, help prevent a lot of that wet soil and then root rot. So I would recommend terracotta pots as well. Yeah, and then the other questions I get is, where do I get all my white pots? I often, you know, for me, I don't necessarily have a specific place. Wherever I find white pots that is just clean and reasonably priced, you know, whether they're from, you know, IKEA, Walmart, Structube, CB2, Plant World, Nursery Garden. Sometimes they'll have like white pots. And I also have a set, a CPG 3-piece white pot set that is a collection piece that's actually going to be discontinued after this shipment is finished. There's only about 100 left, so if you guys want to grab yourself a piece, definitely do it. I'll provide a link onto my store. But yeah, so those are all the questions for now, and hopefully you guys enjoy this little repotting and Q&A with me. Man, I'm running other plant ideas videos. You know, we were supposed to be doing a lot of like plant tours and showing you guys a lot of the plant shops and nurseries I check out in the city of Toronto, and also visiting some of my friends' places and checking out their plants and helping them out. And those are some of the things we were supposed to do, but obviously we can't. You know, we're quarantined. So if you guys have any other ideas of stuff we can do, you know, around the house, definitely comment. Let me know some of your ideas, and I'll see if we can shoot some content for you guys, as well as for me, obviously, because you know, shooting this content not only is a way for me to obviously share my experience with you guys, but also these plants are getting a lot of love now. You know, like I said, this one needed to be repotted badly, so I was glad that we were able to do this today. Other than that, hopefully you guys enjoy the rest of your weekend, and I will see you guys soon. Peace.